Love it. Love it. What else?
Yeah, hi, Brad. Just the tough conversations, just the, dealing with it straight up, not trying to beat around the bush, just hit it square between the eyes.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that the people you're talking with are leaning into those conversations, that they appreciate the directness?
Yeah, I do, and I've had one such conversation, real estate related, and one conversation that was not real estate related, but I handle them both the same way. And it, when for me it was, like the angst of the call is like, or the angst of the conversation just gets, for me, gets dissipated because it's off your shoulder, it's off your back. You put your cards down on the table, and without trepidation, and as long as you're honest, and honest to yourself and honest to the person you're having that conversation with, it works.
Mm-hmm. I think I can't remember if we talked about it here or not, but our imagined version of a conversation that we have yet to have is almost always worse than the actual conversation.
No kidding.
No kidding, right? And here's what I love about that. That's with all of us, with all the like proactive, positive mindset, all that stuff, morning affirmations on my mirror in the bathroom, and the first thing your freaking brain does when you start thinking about a challenging conversation is not only does it go negative, it goes way down the freaking track negative, right? And it's almost always worse than the actual conversation. So to me, that's one of those things that time should give us some perspective on, and we should be able to learn that lesson of, hey, this is, if I just attack the conversation the way I need to, do it in a timely way, right? I don't delay, I don't drag my feet, I don't wring my hands, woe is me, what if, and instead just jump in, have the conversation. Inevitably, it will most likely be better than any version I'm going to make up in my head.
And you don't lose sleep.
And the next 15 things on the to-do list or the must-do list or the success list will also get done, as opposed to getting lost in my head for 6 hours, delay, pretend to lead gen, but not really, and then finally attack the call and to then realize, oh, it wasn't that bad. So yeah, great awareness on that. One more. Something that's been working for you. Talk to me.
I like the beach ball effect because it causes you to look outside of your sphere and look at other people's perspectives before you go into a conversation. Helps you think before you actually approach the conversation.
Yeah. Thank you for that. We're gonna kind of merge off of that a little bit. Our principle today, principle number 5, is obey your instincts. Obey your instincts. Now, I'm going to warn you of something to come. At some point in this conversation, I'm going to tell you to not obey your instincts. But I promise you, it's not in conflict with everything that we're talking about here. Okay? So hang in there, a little cliffhanger. You like that? A little cliffhanger, right? So here we go. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. What is essential, and again, thinking through the filter of relationships, the conversation is the relationship, the essential, those real foundational underpinnings are heart level, not eye level. So that's something we've got to keep in mind as we have this conversation. A reminder, why are we doing this? Why are we diving into fierce conversation? Because while no single conversation is guaranteed to change the trajectory of a career, a company, a relationship, or a life, any single conversation can. And the whole point is to spend the time to figure out how to unlock that potential for every conversation that we get into. Every time we step into a conversation, let's unlock the door to that possibility, okay? Now, here's one I really want you to write down. Really write it down or tattoo it on the inside of your eyelid. You know, that works too. Our radar works perfectly. Our radar works perfectly. It is the operator who is in question. Here's what that means to me. Your gut is a finely tuned machine. Now, if you don't listen to it, or you misinterpret it, or you ignore it, that's operator error. The machine worked, right? The radar system worked. The faint ping was on the screen. You were busy goofing off, drinking a cup of coffee. You weren't paying attention to the little inklings. And here's the challenge with it. Our gut many times whispers to us. Would you agree with that? Right? It's not often that our gut's giving us a single signal that's a big billboard or somebody screaming at us with a megaphone. It's more of a whisper. It's more of a nudge. It's more of a sense. Well, that means we've got to be prepared to listen to it. And that could really be challenging for people. Michelle, did you have something?
No, I just unmuted. But
I'm listening for those little signals. Did you catch that? I'm listening for those little signals.
it's coming.
There you go. There you go. There are things our gut knows long before our intellect catches up. Now, I'll share this with you and see if this resonates with anybody. My experience has been that anytime a client decides to stop working with me, that I'm not actually surprised by it. I knew that something wasn't right. I knew that that was a possible outcome. And I will tell you this, that when I've coached agents who come to me with pulling their hair out because a relationship is off the rails, I will ask the question, how early in that relationship did you realize this was going to be a major challenge? Did you realize this was going to, potentially end this way? More often than not, it was in the very first interaction. The very first interaction, in retrospect, they could see this is a problem. In other words, the radar was working. Right? The radar was working. The operator failed to pay attention to it. And that's the thing I want you guys to keep in mind with this is, if you look back, it is much easier to recognize when your gut has really worked for you, really served you, than it is to try to do it in the moment. But by learning those lessons in the rearview mirror, we can be better tuned to seeing them as they come through the windshield. But we got to pause. We've got to take the time to do that. Okay. Now here's another piece of gold. We got one eyelid left, so I tattoo it on the inside of the other eyelid. How we enter our conversations is how we emerge from them. How we enter the conversation is how we emerge from the conversation. In bold, we used to talk about it this way. How are you showing up today? Are you showing up like this? Or are you showing up like this? Because if you show up like this and I'm trying to give you something, it doesn't really work, right? But if you're showing up like this, you're ready to receive. It's a very simple metaphor, but let's go back and review what we've talked about fierce conversations sounding like and feeling like, right? We're going to speak with our real voice. If I enter the conversation that way, it's more likely to be a real conversation. We're going to speak to the heart of the matter, right? We're not going to be tiptoeing around the tulips. We're going to be dealing with the fire, not the smoke. I'm going to enter the conversation that way, right? If I enter the conversation going, I don't really want to deal with this, but I kind of got to address it, well, guess what? It's not going to really get dealt with. And the issue is going to continue to linger. I'm going to really ask and really listen. Well, to really listen, I have to be open to possibilities. If I'm not open to possibilities, then it's likely that I'm going to miss messages. I'm going to miss the learning opportunity for myself, right? It's going to generate heat. It's going to enrich the relationship. That's a two-way street, right, for both of those. And lastly, you are going to be different when the conversation is over. How often are you entering conversations with that expectation that this is a conversation that can change me? I'm initiating it, and it can change me. That's a different posture than most of us enter most conversations. How we enter our conversations is how we emerge from them. If we're entering it in a it's my way or the highway kind of mentality or kind of posture, that's most likely what we're going to get from it, right? And in a team environment, that means I'm going to get a lot of nodding and not a whole hell of a lot of buy-in, right? I'm going to hear words of commitment, but I won't see the feet of commitment because I've shoved it down their throat. Are we seeing the difference in there, in those two approaches in terms of how we can enter a conversation? Now I'm going to start talking out of the other side of my mouth. Are we ready? All right, here we go. There is a time, and I find it to be fairly consistent, that our gut is trying to tell us something that perhaps isn't to our benefit. And my favorite example of that is the hiring process. The hiring process. Who here on the call has taken career visioning? The hiring process that we teach at Keller Williams, about half of us. So I'll give you the outline real quick, right? We're going to do an initial screening of a candidate. That's going to take 20 to 30 minutes. We're going to have them take an assessment. That's going to take an hour. Then we're going to have 4 different interviews, each of those taking an hour plus time in between of a day or two break. We're going to get multiple references from them. We're going to go deep on those references. We're going to talk to a minimum of 9 or 10 people on the reference side. We're going to have a group interview where we gain additional perspective. Think beach ball. We're going to have a defense of the hire, again, gaining other perspective. Think beach ball. Then we're going to have an expectations dialogue with the person, which could take anywhere from a half hour to an hour, all before making an offer. And then Brad's going to tell you the first 90 days of the person being in the role is the last 90 days of the hiring process. So the first 10 to 15 hours you spend with them in the hiring process is just the beginning. The first 90 days on the job is still the hiring process, and you need to continue to be looking for the candidates through that whole process. Now, does that sound painful or what? Yeah! And everything else will take longer. So here's what I see over and over and over again. People's gut telling them that they're a good read of character. Hey, I don't need to follow this process. You know, I know how to read people. You know, I'm a good judge of character. You know, I've known this person for 6 weeks. I think I really know them. All of those things are your gut telling you, this is a lot of work. We can avoid the work. Your gut's trying to protect you from the process. But there's value in the process. We're trying to switch from entrepreneurial to purposeful in our hiring. And your body's saying, man, this is going to be hard. Yup. The radar's still right. This is going to be hard. and we can't skip it. Lee, I see your hand. What do you got, sister?
Well, I raised my hand a little while back when you said our gut knows from the very first instinct, like from the very first meeting. You said something like that, and
That has been my experience. That when I end up with a challenging client,
Mhm.
if I look back in retrospect, I knew from day one. Now that's not always the case, but I find that to be more often the case. The listing that doesn't sell, you probably had an inkling that that sucker wasn't gonna sell the day you were sitting at their table. That's what I'm kind of speaking to there, Lee.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Just because I know that there's some people that come off a little hard on the first call, and the more you dig down, you can really solidify a good relationship. If you're
Yes.
on the same
Yes.
Yeah.
I completely agree, right? So the unknown can trend towards very positive, you know. I shared this in some of my classes. The worst no I ever got was calling on a for sale by owner. Route 4, Turner, Maine, 225-3617. 225-3617, that's still his phone number. And called on it, said, hey, I'm looking to find some land for a buyer of mine. Haven't been able to find anything in the MLS. I see you've got land for sale. Saw your sign. What are you selling? And to keep it PG-13, he said, hey, if you're calling to take the listing, you might as well shut the F up. Those are the first words of our relationship, right? And that was a script, right? How do I get rid of, realtors that I don't want to talk to because they don't actually have a buyer, they just want to list the property? Well, there's a good script. Hey, David, you might as well shut the F up, right? That works on most realtors, right? That man and I have been friends ever since. That is the longest lasting client relationship I have, is that guy right there. So yes, just because it starts hard doesn't mean it's going to be bad. What I'm saying is that, man, something ain't right, right? Here's where I often see it show up. That person speaks poorly about everybody else except you when you're in front of them, right? Everybody else is the devil, but you're awesome. You're awesome. If that's a trend, you're soon going to be on the devil list, right? The proof is there, right? It's going to happen because everybody that they're in relationship with ends up on that list, right? It's a theme, and you're not so good that you're not going to end up on that list. So that's what I'm saying. It's just that have this awareness that those signs often show up before we can even verbalize them. Before we can even verbalize what the issue is, it'll often show up. Now, what I'm saying out this other side is there are times where your gut's going to say, hey, we don't have to do this. We don't have to follow this process. We can skip that. Right now, you've got an opportunity to take bold pivot, right? I don't make one nickel talking about bold, so just be clear on that, right? It's not a sales pitch. But the challenge I'd put in front of you is if you're not going to engage in that, then show me your calendar for May of how you're going to grow faster and more dynamically for your business than that material. And if you've got it, awesome, cool, great. The vast majority of agents who will not engage in bold will not have a better alternative. It's their gut talking to them going, oh, you don't need it. You took bold before. You don't need this. Well, if your business is struggling, you need something. More of the same ain't going to do it. More of the same ain't going to do it. So we see in the hiring process where many times people will listen to their gut and ignore a process that would actually give them a better result, right? Now, here's the alternative on the hiring process for the gut. When you have followed the process, when you have taken the time to really follow that process and everything is saying yes, and your gut is saying no, listen. It is exposing something that the process has yet to expose, but time working with the person probably will. So digging deeper, getting more references, wherever there's some inkling of uncertainty, really unpacking that, leaning into it, right? More often than not, when people decide to continue to move forward with the higher, even though they've got this, like, man, something ain't right here, it typically ends horribly, right? That's the person who's the pathological liar who has a great history of stealing from people. Awesome. Your gut told you, but man, they're really good at interviewing. They've got a robust list of references that they're able to hand you, right? And somehow we don't unpack it until the lies start to convict somebody. But your gut was right. Your gut was right at the beginning. So I just want you to understand that the gut is always telling you important information. We do need to listen to it. And I think there are times where our gut is telling us, you don't, I'll give you an example. One of our guys up in Maine right now, avid runner, isn't running right now because he just had back surgery. So he's got every excuse to not be moving around right now, right? Freaking recovering from back surgery. And, the doctors have recommended, hey, you should go on some leisurely walks. You should do some PT exercises. You should do this. You should do that. He's got to engage in those things, right? His body may be saying, hey, now's the time to just rest. And it's not wrong. And he knows intellectually, man, I do have to get moving here. I do have to get moving here. So we just have to be able to listen and then discern, what the heck is my gut telling me? Many of us have just stopped listening to it altogether. And then if that's us, we've really missed an opportunity. We've really missed an opportunity to have a whole nother perspective, which is beyond our intellect and is more at a heart level, gut level. So this concept here is a little more out there than I think some of the more concrete pieces that we talk about in Fears. So I want to give us a few extra minutes here to answer any questions that you guys have. Where's your head at in this? What are you ruminating on? And love to dive into it.
Brad, would you say that this particular rule is like having a fierce conversation with yourself in terms of listening to your gut?
God, man, huh? How good is that? Yes. Yeah. I've got my conscious thoughts here, and then there's this subconscious or this heart level thing that's going on. And it becomes this balancing act between the two. Sometimes I've got to push the intellect aside and go, hey, just because I checked all the boxes doesn't mean it's right or doesn't mean it's wrong. And other times I got to go, hey, what is my body really saying? What is it really trying to protect me from here? If it's trying to protect me from discomfort, which there's times where our bodies are trying to do that, we know that growth shows up when we step into discomfort. That's where we begin to grow, Our bodies want to guard us from risk, but it's by taking risks that we fail, and it's by failing that we learn. So, love it. Who else?
Brad, I would say your example of career visioning in 30-60-90 is perfect. That demonstrates David's comment about having that fierce conversation with yourself and forces us to have the fierce conversations with the person we're interviewing. I just hired a new admin in February, but we started the whole process in like November.
Right.
And there were 3 people, that were kind of like from the very start, I'm like, yeah, this feels good. This feels good. And midway through, the other 2 eventually dropped out. And if I had selected the first person, what I found, weeks into the process was that she was faking it. She was a really good interviewer. So, but the whole time I was struggling with because I found it a painful process.
Mm-hmm.
But I just said, okay, let's use the process to check my gut, intellectually. So
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was a perfect example.
Love it. Lori, I see your hand.
Yeah, I was going to say, one of the things I noticed in looking back on trying to learn how to trust my gut is if I'm trying too hard in the relationship, something isn't right. I'm
Yeah.
not feeling like I'm acting like myself,
Mm-hmm.
just trying too hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It always takes effort, right? So I'm just trying to balance that thought process. It always takes effort to create relationships, develop relationships, all that kind of stuff. And there are times where if we're listening to our gut, we're forcing it, right?
Yeah.
It's gone beyond the effort part and we're forcing the issue. And yes, I agree that that's often a time where we should listen and go like, wait a minute, what am I doing here?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a tuning in, right? That's a tuning into it. I can't stress enough how important I think it is to reflect on, how has your gut talked to you in the past? And with the reflection of time, was it accurate? Right? Was what it was trying to tell you the right thing? Was I trying to force it, and by forcing it, did the result basically end up being the same anyway? Right? Didn't get the listing,
Mm-hmm.
didn't have that relationship, didn't have, you know what I mean? Like all that kind of stuff. So one more real quick. Chris Labardi, good morning. Good to see you. Good to see your face.
Can I share?
Yes, Mindy, but
All
start by
right.
coughing all over us first.
I'm outside.
Awesome.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Yep.
All right, excellent. So when I was in Bold in the end of fall, I had interviewed with a FSBO that intellectually everything was going right. And every time I met with him, in my gut, I was just not feeling right. And I felt very exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
So I told him I would not take his listing. He's now been on the market 4 months, 2 different agents, listing just expired, just renewed. So glad I trust my gut and said next.
Yep.
Another example is I had met with somebody that was referred to me for a listing, and I thought that I could skip the process like you were talking about with hiring, and I didn't get the listing.
Yes.
So I learned from,
Yep.
now I've had other referrals since then. I go through the process. Even when they try and jump ahead,
Right.
I reel them back in and say, let's go through everything. I know you probably already know this, but let me just make sure that I have done my due diligence by explaining it.
It's such a great example. It reminded me of when I had my own team, had a buyer agent on the team. Buyer agent referred me his cousin, one of his first cousins, great person. Had a great tour of the house. The motivation was there. Da 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 da. And I'm in my head. I'm like, this is in the bag. I don't need to go through my whole spiel, right? So I basically just gave her the paperwork, and as I'm handing her the pen, she said, thank you. It's a big decision. Love to think about it overnight. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, I get that. Walked out. My buyer agent called me 30 minutes later and said, she hates you. Like, wow. I don't get many hates, doesn't happen very often. And you know what? I hadn't done all the stuff I knew I was supposed to do. My body was telling me like, hey, we can fast forward through this. It was trying to protect me from the work. And that's where I find that that's where we've just got to be tuned into that. Like, is it trying to protect me from something bad, or is it trying to protect me from the hard work that will get me actually more purposeful results? So that's the tuning I hope for you. Quick teaser, last two on the next 2 days. Tell a friend. We're going to cover take responsibility for your emotional wake. Taking responsibility for your emotional wake. In other words, what happens in a room after you leave it? And then let's talk about our last one, which will be Friday. Let silence do the heavy lifting. Let silence do the heavy lifting. And I will tell you, if you've done a disc profile before and you're a very typical combination, D-I-I-D, just D, just I, both of those can be very convicting in terms of emotional wake and having the ability to shut your pie hole and listen. We will pick it up tomorrow, 11:30 sharp, same bat time, same bat channel. Love you all. Be safe. Be like Mindy. Put your mask on and get outside. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.